I stood in the midst of the pulsating crowd, the energy of the packed stadium in Nashville almost overwhelming. The air was electric, alive with the anticipation of Caddy's return to the stage. She had been on a break for what felt like forever, and tonight marked the beginning of her comeback tour. As the lights dimmed, the crowd's roar intensified, and then, in a blaze of light and sound, she was there, my wife, Caddy Stewart, the star of the night. Her voice soared over the audience, a blend of raw power and delicate emotion that had always captivated me. Tonight, it was as if she had found a new gear, her performance more passionate and commanding than I remembered. She radiated confidence and charisma, her connection with the audience palpable. I watched, entranced, feeling a swell of pride and love. This was the woman I had married, the woman I had supported through thick and thin. As the final notes of her set echoed through the arena, the crowd erupted, and I felt a surge of elation. Caddy was back, and she was better than ever. After the concert, there was a celebratory party. The venue's backstage area had been transformed into a lively scene, filled with laughter, music, and the smell of champagne. I navigated through the crowd, catching snippets of conversations and clinking glasses. Musicians, crew members, and a handful of VIPs mingled, toasting to the success of the night. I finally spotted Caddy near the bar, laughing with Danny Blake, her lead guitarist. Danny was a talented musician, a vital part of Caddy's band, and they had always had a good rapport. Seeing them together now, though, I couldn't help but notice the ease and familiarity between them. I approached, slipping my arm around Caddy's waist. "Amazing show tonight," I said, smiling. She turned to me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Thanks, Jack." It felt incredible to be back out there. She leaned in and kissed me, a quick but affectionate gesture that was comforting. Danny raised his glass. "Here's to the first of many great shows," he said, grinning. We clinked glasses, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. But as the night wore on, I began to notice small things that unsettled me. Caddy and Danny seemed to be in their own world, their heads bent together in intense conversation about new songs, upcoming gigs, and musical ideas. They shared private jokes and exchanged looks that spoke of a deep understanding. I tried to brush off my unease, telling myself it was just the high of the tour's kickoff, that they were simply caught up in the excitement. As the night wound down, I found myself talking with Charlie, the band's manager. Charlie was a sharp, no-nonsense guy, the kind who kept everything running smoothly. He had a knack for noticing things, and tonight he seemed particularly observant. "Great show tonight," I said, trying to make small talk. Charlie nodded. "Yeah, Caddy really nailed it. The whole band did." I noticed him glance over at Caddy and Danny, who were now sitting at a table, heads close together as they talked animatedly. "They seem to be getting along well," I said, trying to sound casual. Charlie gave me a sidelong look. "Yeah, they've been spending a lot of time together lately." "Working on new material mostly." I felt a flicker of irritation. "Well, that's good, right? She's always been driven by key collaboration." "Sure," Charlie said slowly. "Just keep an eye on things. These tours can get intense. People sometimes don't forget their boundaries." I frowned, not liking the implication, but unable to dismiss the uneasy feeling that had been growing in me. "I trust Caddy," I said, perhaps more defensively than I intended. Charlie nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course. Just thought I'd mention it. The next few days were a whirlwind as the tour moved to the next city. I traveled with the band, wanting to support Caddy and soak in the experience of her tour. Yet the more time I spent with them, the more I noticed the subtle changes in Caddy's behavior. She seemed more distant, more absorbed in her work with Danny. They would spend hours together, often late into the night, working on songs and discussing arrangements. Whenever I tried to join their sessions, I felt like an outsider, a third wheel. It wasn't just me who noticed. The rest of the band seemed to sense the shift as well. During rehearsals, there was a noticeable tension. Derek, the drummer, and Lisa, the bassist, exchanged looks whenever Caddy and Danny went off on one of their creative tangents, seemingly oblivious to the rest of the group. The camaraderie that had always characterized Caddy's band felt strained, replaced by an undercurrent of discomfort. One evening, after a particularly long rehearsal, I found myself alone with Derek. We were sitting in the hotel bar, nursing drinks and watching the city lights through the window. I decided to bring up what had been bothering me. Is it just me, or does Caddy seem different lately? I asked, keeping my tone light. Derek sighed, taking a long sip of his drink. You've noticed it too, huh? She and Danny have been pretty inseparable. Not that it's any of my business, but it's affecting the rest of us. I nodded, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Yeah, what's going on? But it's like she's shutting me out. Derek glanced at me, his expression sympathetic. It's tough, man. Being on the road, living in each other's pockets. It does things to people, just to be careful, okay? I thanked him for his advice, though it did little to ease my worries. That night, as I lay awake in the hotel room, waiting for Caddy to return from another late-night session with Danny, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away. Our conversations were becoming shorter, our moments together fewer and far between. When she finally came in, her eyes bright with excitement about a new song they were working on, I couldn't bring myself to share in her enthusiasm. Jack, you won't believe what we came up with tonight, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed, her face glowing. That's great, I said, forcing a smile. I'm glad you're so inspired. She looked at me, her expression shifting to concern. You're not mad, are you? I know I've been spending a lot of time with Danny, but it's all about the music. You understand that, right? I nodded, but the words felt hollow. Of course, I just miss you, that's all. She leaned over and kissed me, her touch warm but somehow distant. I miss you too. I promise I'll make more time for us. I wanted to believe her, wanted to hold on to the hope that things would get better. But as she drifted off to sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of doubts I couldn't ignore. Something had changed, and I couldn't shake the fear that whatever it was only the beginning. The tour rolled into its next stop, Atlanta, and the days blurred together in a mix of sound checks, performances, and travel. Caddy's schedule grew increasingly demanding, and our interactions became more sporadic. I tried to support her, understanding the pressures of the tour, but the distance between us widened, fed by her relentless drive and my growing insecurities. One afternoon, while Caddy and the band were rehearsing, I found myself in the hotel lobby, nursing a cup of coffee. Charlie wandered in and sat down across from me, his expression unreadable. I braced myself for what he might say, my nerves already frayed from the tension of the past weeks. Jack, you've got a minute? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Sure, I replied, trying to sound equally casual. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I've been watching what's going on with Caddy and Danny. I think it's time we had a real talk about it. I tensed, not wanting to confront the issue but knowing I couldn't avoid it forever. What do you mean? Charlie sighed, rubbing his temples as if he were trying to find the right words. Look, I've been in this business a long time. I've seen a lot of things happen on tour. When people are together all the time working closely, emotions can get tangled up. I'm not saying anything definite is going on, but there's a vibe. You've seen it too, I nodded reluctantly. Yeah, I've noticed. They're always together, always talking about the music. It's like nothing else exists for them. Charlie studied me for a moment. You know Caddy better than anyone. If you think something's wrong, you need to address it. You can't just let it fester. His words hit hard, a mix of truth and the painful reality I'd been trying to ignore. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, grappling with my thoughts. By the time Caddy returned from rehearsal, I had made up my mind to talk to her. We sat in our hotel room, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. Caddy was buzzing from the day's work, her eyes alight with enthusiasm. But as she looked at me, she seemed to sense the shift in my demeanor. Jack, what's wrong? She asked, sitting beside me on the bed. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. Caddy, we need to talk about what's been happening between you and Danny. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. What do you mean? I looked at her, struggling to find the right words. You've been spending so much time with him. I get that you're working on the music, but it's more than that. You're shutting me out, and I can't help but feel like there's something more going on. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment she looked genuinely hurt. Jack, no, it's not like that. Danny and I are just working on new material. We've got a great creative connection, but that's all it is. I wanted to believe her, but the doubts were too strong. It feels like more, Caddy. You two are always together, always talking in private. I'm not trying to accuse you of anything, but I need to know if there's something I should be worried about. She reached out, taking my hand in hers. I promise you, Jack, there's nothing going on. I love you, and I'm committed to you. Danny and I are just friends, nothing more. Her words were reassuring, but the look in her eyes held a hint of something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe just frustration. I nodded, deciding to trust her despite the nagging doubts that still lingered. Over the next few days, I tried to push my concerns aside, focusing on supporting Caddy and being present for her. I spent more time with the band, trying to immerse myself in their world and understand the dynamics better. It helped to an extent, but there was always that underlying tension whenever Caddy and Danny were together. One evening, after a particularly intense performance, the band decided to unwind at a local bar. It was a cozy, dimly lit place with a laid-back vibe, a welcome change from the high-energy chaos of the tour. I watched as Caddy and Danny sat at the bar, their heads close together as they laughed over something. I tried to ignore the pang of jealousy that flared up, focusing instead on chatting with Lisa and Derek. As the night wore on, I found myself drifting towards the bar, feeling the need to be closer to Caddy. When I reached her, she turned and smiled, a look of genuine warmth that eased some of my worries. "Hey, Jack," she said, sliding an arm around my waist. "Having a good time?" "Yeah," I replied, returning her smile. Just needed a break from the noise. Danny looked up, his expression unreadable as he nodded in my direction. "Hey, Jack, want a drink?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, why not?" He ordered another round, and we made awkward small talk as we waited. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding, that I was a third wheel in their easy camaraderie. When the drinks arrived, I took a sip, trying to ignore the uncomfortable silence that had settled over us. Caddy must have sensed the tension because she turned to me, her expression apologetic. "Jack, can we talk for a minute?" I nodded, and she led me outside, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of the bar. We stood in silence for a moment before she spoke. "I know things have been tense between us lately," she said, her voice soft. "I want you to know that I'm trying to balance everything, but it's hard. This tour means a lot to me, and the music. It's my life." "I get that," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm proud of you, Cotty. I just don't want to lose you to She reached out, taking my hand. "You're not going to lose me. I love you, Jack. I need you to believe that." I squeezed her hand, wanting to believe her more than anything. "I'm trying, Caddy. I really am." We stood there for a while, the sounds of the city around us, trying to find our way back to each other. Eventually, we returned to the bar, the moment of connection easing some of the strain. But the doubts remained, a shadow that I couldn't quite dispel. The next city on the tour was New Orleans, a place of vibrant music and rich culture. Caddy was excited, her spirits lifted by the thought of performing in such a storied location. I tried to match her enthusiasm, hoping that a change of scenery might help us reconnect. As we settled into the new hotel, I noticed a shift in the band's dynamics. The tensions that had simmered beneath the surface were becoming more pronounced. Lisa and Derek seemed increasingly distant, their interactions with Caddy and Danny laced with a subtle resentment. It was as if the band was slowly fracturing, the weight of unspoken issues taking its toll. One evening, after a particularly fraught rehearsal, I found myself alone with Lisa in the hotel lobby. She seemed on edge, her usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a tense silence. "You okay?" I asked, sensing she needed someone to talk to. She glanced at me, her expression troubled. "I don't know, Jack. Things have been weird lately. The band's not what it used to be." I nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy. "Yeah, I've noticed. It's been tough on everyone." Lisa sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's more than just the tour stress. Kati and Danny, they've been acting different. It's like they're in their own bubble, and the rest of us are just here for the ride. I hesitated, then decided to share my concerns. I've been worried about that too. I don't know what's going on with them, but it's affecting everything. She looked at me, a mix of empathy and frustration in her eyes. I just hope it doesn't tear the band apart. We've worked so hard to get here, and it feels like it's all slipping away. Her words echoed my own fears, the sense of impending loss that had been gnawing at me. We sat in silence for a while, both of us grappling with the uncertainty that hung over us. The night of the New Orleans show arrived, and Kati poured her heart into the performance. She seemed to draw energy from the city's vibrant atmosphere, her voice soaring over the audience with a passion that was both thrilling and heartbreaking. I watched from the sidelines, a mix of pride and sorrow welling up in me. This was the Kati I had fallen in love with, the woman whose talent and drive had always amazed me. But now, that same drive was pulling us apart. After the show, there was a reception at a nearby club, a chance for the band to mingle with fans and industry insiders. I joined them, trying to shake off the melancholy that had settled over me. The club was packed, the air thick with music and conversation. I wandered through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with people I barely knew, all the while keeping an eye on Kati. She was in her element, surrounded by admirers and fellow musicians. I watched as she laughed. Our next stop was Austin, a city steeped in music and creativity, where the streets pulsed with an energy that was almost palpable. The tour's momentum seemed to carry us along, but for me, each day felt heavier than the last. Kati's connection with Danny continued to grow, overshadowing our relationship and casting a shadow over my thoughts. We arrived at our hotel in the early afternoon, and while Kati and the band headed off for soundcheck, I decided to take a walk. Austin's vibrant downtown offered a temporary escape from my worries. The eclectic mix of street performers, bustling cafes, and music venues was a welcome distraction, if only for a little while. I wandered aimlessly, trying to clear my mind, but every thought seemed to circle back to Kati and Danny. By the time I returned, the hotel lobby was buzzing with activity as fans and staff prepared for the evening show. I spotted Charlie talking to a couple of roadies and decided to catch up with him. Maybe he'd have some insight or at least a different perspective on what was happening. "Hey, Jack," Charlie greeted me with a nod as I approached. "Hey," I replied, forcing a smile. "How's it going?" "Same old chaos," he said, glancing around the busy lobby. "You holding up okay?" I shrugged, not sure how to answer. "I'm trying. Just, worried, you know." Charlie gave me a sympathetic look. "Yeah, I get it. These tours can be rough on relationships. Have you talked to Kati about how you're feeling?" "I've tried," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "But it's like she's in her own world. All she talks about is the music and the tour. I feel like I'm losing her." Charlie nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen it before. Sometimes people get so caught up in the moment, they forget what's important. You need to find a way to get through to her." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. "Yeah, I know, I just don't know how." As we talked, I noticed Kati and Danny returning from soundcheck, their heads close together in conversation. They were laughing, completely engrossed in each other. The sight made my stomach churn, and I turned away, not wanting to let Charlie see how much it bothered me. "I should go get ready for the show," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Hang in there, Jack," Charlie said, giving me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Things have a way of working out, one way or another." I nodded, appreciating his attempt at comfort, even if it did little to ease my worries. The concert that night was at one of Austin's iconic venues, a place known for its history and atmosphere. The crowd was lively, their excitement infectious, and Kati seemed to feed off their energy. As she performed, I watched from the wings, torn between admiration and heartache. She was magnificent on stage, her presence commanding, her voice captivating, but as she sang, I couldn't help but feel like she was slipping further away from me. After the show, there was the usual post-concert chaos, fans clamoring for autographs, crew members packing up equipment, and the band trying to unwind. I lingered near the dressing rooms, hoping to catch a moment alone with Kati. She emerged, still glowing from the performance, and spotted me. "Jack," she called, waving me over with a bright smile. I walked over, trying to match her enthusiasm. You were amazing tonight, I said, meaning every word despite my conflicted feelings. Thanks, she said, her eyes shining. It felt incredible up there. The crowd was fantastic. As we talked, Danny approached, carrying a couple of drinks. Hey, Caddy, you want to join us for a celebration drink? He asked, his eyes flicking to me briefly. Caddy hesitated, glancing between us. Actually, I was thinking Jack and I could have some time together. We haven't had a chance to really talk lately. Danny raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise in his expression. Oh, sure, no problem. Catch up with you later then? Yeah, definitely, Caddy said, giving him a quick smile before turning back to me. Ready to go? We walked out of the venue together, and for the first time in a while, it felt like we were on the same page. We found a quiet cafe nearby, a cozy place with dim lighting and a relaxed atmosphere. We settled into a corner booth, the noise of the tour fading into the background. Jack, Caddy began, her expression serious. I know things have been tough lately. I've been so caught up in the tour and I haven't been fair to you. I'm sorry. I took her hand, feeling a glimmer of hope. I just miss you, Caddy. I miss us. It feels like we're drifting apart. She nodded, her eyes filling with regret. I know I've been so focused on the music and Diddy. He's been a big part of that. But you're my husband, and I don't want to lose you. Hearing her say that was a balm to my wounded heart. I don't want to lose you either, but I need to know that I'm still important to you, that we're still a team. We are, she said, squeezing my hand, and I promise I'll make more time for us. I'll try to balance things better. This tour means a lot to me, but you mean more. For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of connection. We spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing our thoughts and fears, trying to bridge the gap that had grown between us. By the time we returned to the hotel, I felt lighter, more hopeful. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to start fresh. Caddy was still asleep, her face peaceful in the soft morning light. I watched her for a moment, feeling a rush of love and determination. I wanted to be there for her, to support her dreams, but I also needed to protect our relationship. Later that day, as the band gathered for rehearsal, I decided to take a more active role. I spent time with the other members, trying to ease the tension and build a sense of camaraderie. Lisa and Derek seemed relieved to have someone to talk to, and even Danny seemed more approachable, though the undercurrent of competition between us remained. As the tour moved on, I made a point of being present at every rehearsal and performance, immersing myself in the music and the dynamics of the group. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the sight of Caddy and Danny together still stung, but I tried to focus on the bigger picture. I wanted to understand what drove them, what made their collaboration so intense, and how I could fit into that world without feeling like an outsider. One afternoon, during a break in rehearsal, I found myself alone with Danny. He was tuning his guitar, his focus on the strings, but I sensed an opportunity to talk. Hey, Danny, I said, approaching cautiously. Can we talk for a minute? He looked up, his expression wary but curious. Sure. What's up? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I just wanted to clear the air. I know things have been weird between us, and I get that you and Caddy have a strong creative connection. I don't want to come between that, but I also don't want to feel like I'm losing her. Danny nodded, setting his guitar aside. I get it, Jack. This tour's been intense, and Caddy and I have been working closely. But it's all about the music. She loves you, man. I'm not trying to get in the way of that. His words were sincere, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Thanks, Danny. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We are, he said, offering a small smile. Caddy's an amazing artist, and you're a big part of her life. We're just trying to make the best music we can. Our conversation didn't resolve everything, but it was a start. Over the next few days, I noticed a subtle shift in the group's dynamics. Caddy made a conscious effort to include me more, and Danny seemed more respectful of our relationship. The tension that had plagued us began to ease, replaced by a tentative but growing sense of understanding. As the tour progressed, I continued to navigate the challenges of being on the road. balancing my support for Caddy with my need for reassurance and connection. There were still moments of doubt, times when the sight of Caddy and Danny working closely together sparked a pang of jealousy, but I tried to focus on the bigger picture. Our next stop was Denver, and as we arrived, I felt a cautious sense of optimism. Caddy and I had made progress, and I was determined to keep building on that. The city's crisp air and stunning mountain views offered a refreshing change of pace, and I hoped it would bring a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. On the night of the Denver show, I stood in the wings, watching Caddy perform. She was radiant, her voice powerful, and her presence magnetic. As she sang, I felt a surge of pride and love, a reminder of why I had fallen for her in the first place. Despite the challenges and the doubts, I knew that I was still deeply in love with her. After the show, we found a quiet moment alone. The tour continued its relentless march, each new city a blur of sound checks, performances, and late-night drives. We arrived in San Francisco with a palpable sense of exhaustion hanging over the band. The past few weeks had been a roller coaster of emotions, but things between Caddy and me had settled into a tentative truce. I clung to the hope that we were on the path to rebuilding our relationship, though the specter of her connection with Danny still loomed large in my mind. San Francisco was a city of contrasts, its foggy mornings giving way to vibrant afternoons and lively nights. The venue for the evening's show was an old theater with a storied history, its ornate facade a testament to a bygone era of entertainment. I spent the afternoon exploring the nearby neighborhoods, trying to shake off the anxiety that had become my constant companion. Back at the hotel, I found Caddy in our room, sprawled on the bed with her laptop, headphones in place as she reviewed the night's setlist. She looked up as I entered, a smile lighting up her face. "Hey," she said, pulling off the headphones. "How was your day?" "Pretty good," I replied, trying to match her enthusiasm. "Just wandered around the city a bit. It's beautiful here." She nodded, her eyes drifting back to the screen. "Yeah, it is. I love the vibe of this place." I sat down beside her, feeling the need to bridge the gap that had grown between us. "Caddy, I know things have been rough lately, but I'm really trying to make this work. I want to be here for you, to support you, but I need to feel like we're in this together." She turned to me, her expression softening. "I know, Jack. I'm trying to. This tour has been so intense and I've been so wrapped up in it. I haven't been fair to you, but I'm glad you're here. It means a lot to me." Her words were a balm to my troubled heart, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the connection we used to share. "Thanks, Caddy. I just want us to be okay. We will be," she said, reaching for my hand. "We just need to keep talking, keep working through teas." That evening, as the band prepared for the show, I noticed a change in the atmosphere. There was a sense of anticipation, a buzz of excitement that hadn't been there in recent weeks. Lisa and Derek seemed more engaged, their interactions with Katie and Danny less strained. Even Danny appeared more relaxed, his usual intensity tempered by a newfound camaraderie. The concert was a resounding success, the theater filled with the energy of an enthusiastic crowd. Caddy's performance was electric, her voice soaring over the audience with a power that sent chills down my spine. I watched from the wings, my heart swelling with pride. Despite the challenges we had faced, she was still the woman I had fallen in love with, her talent and passion undiminished. After the show, the band gathered in the green room, a small, cramped space filled with the smell of sweat and excitement. The air was thick with the afterglow of the performance, and everyone was in high spirits. Caddy was glowing, her face flushed with the thrill of the night. "That was amazing," she exclaimed, her eyes shining as she turned to Danny. "You were on fire tonight." Danny grinned, his usual cool demeanor softened by genuine excitement. "You too, Caddy. That solo on Breaking Free was incredible." I watched their interaction, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. I couldn't deny the creative spark they shared, but it was hard to ignore the pang of jealousy that accompanied their easy camaraderie. Still, I reminded myself of our conversation earlier, of the promises we had made to each other. As the night wore on, we made our way to a nearby bar, a favorite haunt of local musicians. The place was packed, the air filled with the hum of conversation and the strains of live music. I found a seat at the bar, ordering a drink and trying to relax. Caddy was mingling with fans and fellow musicians, her energy infectious. I was nursing my drink, lost in thought, when Charlie appeared beside me, a beer in hand. "Hey, Jack. How's it going?" "Hey, Charlie," I replied, grateful for the distraction. "Not bad, just trying to keep up with everything." He nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "I hear you. It's been a wild ride. But I gotta say, tonight was something else. Caddy's really in her element." "Yeah, she is," I said, glancing over at her. "It's great to see her so happy." Charlie studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You're a good man, Jack. Not many people would stick it out like you have." "It's clear you care about her a lot." "I do," I said, my voice tinged with a mix of pride and sadness. "She's everything to me. I just hope I'm enough for her." Charlie clapped me on the shoulder, a reassuring gesture that brought a small measure of comfort. "You are, Jack. Just keep being there for her. It's all anyone can ask." As the night wore on, the bar grew more crowded, the music louder, the atmosphere more chaotic. I lost track of Caddy in the throng of people, but I didn't worry. She was in her element, surrounded by friends and admirers. I decided to step outside for some fresh air, the noise and energy of the bar overwhelming. The cool night air was a welcome relief, and I leaned against the brick wall, taking a deep breath. I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts, to find some sense of clarity amid the chaos. But my mind kept drifting back to Caddy and Danny, to the connection they shared, and the doubts that still lingered in my heart. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice Danny until he was standing beside me. "Hey, Jack, you okay?" I started, turning to him with a forced smile. "Yeah, just needed some air. It's pretty crazy in there." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, it is. Caddy's really something, isn't she?" "She is," I agreed, trying to gauge his intentions. Danny leaned against the wall, his gaze distant. "You know, Jack, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About not wanting to come between you and Caddy." I tensed, not sure where this conversation was headed. "Yeah," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it now more than I did before. This tour, the music, it's all consuming. It's easy to get caught up in it, to lose sight of what's important. But Caddy loves you. She talks about you all the time, about how much you mean to her." I felt a surge of relief at his words, though it was tempered by lingering doubts. "Thanks, Danny. That means a lot to hear." He nodded, his gaze meeting mine. "I'm not trying to come between you two. I just want what's best for the band, and for Caddy. And I think what's best for her is having you by her side." We stood there in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city around us. For the first time, I felt a genuine sense of understanding between us, a fragile but real connection. As the tour moved on to its final leg, the atmosphere among the band grew more focused. The end was in sight, and everyone seemed determined to finish strong. Caddy and I had found a new rhythm, a balance between her commitments to the band and our relationship. There were still challenges, moments of tension and doubt, but we faced them together, determined to make it through. Our final stop was Los Angeles, a city of dreams and endless possibilities. The tour's climax promised to be a grand affair, with industry insiders and fans alike flocking to the iconic venue. The anticipation was palpable, a mix of excitement and nervous energy that pervaded every moment. On the day of the final show, I woke early, a sense of nervous anticipation churning in my stomach. Caddy was already up, pacing the room as she went over the set list for the 100th time. I watched her, a mix of pride and anxiety filling me. "You okay?" I asked, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. She turned to me, her expression a mix of excitement and nerves. "Yeah, just a lot riding on tonight. I want it to be perfect." "It will be," I said, trying to reassure her. "You're amazing, Caddy. You've got this." She smiled, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thanks, Jack. I don't know what I'd do without you." As we prepared for the evening, the reality of the tour's end began to sink in. It had been a whirlwind, a journey of highs and lows, but through it all we had managed to hold on to each other. I felt a sense of accomplishment, of having weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. The final show was a triumph, the band delivering a performance that was nothing short of spectacular. The crowd was electric, their cheers and applause a testament to the impact Katy and her band had made. I watched from the wings, my heart swelling with pride and relief. This was the culmination of everything we had worked for, and it was a moment I would never forget. Chapter 5. The final show in Los Angeles was a whirlwind of applause, flashing lights, and an overwhelming sense of achievement. After the last chord faded and the stage lights dimmed, Katy and her band were greeted with an uproarious standing ovation. The energy in the venue was electric, a fitting climax to a grueling yet triumphant tour. Backstage, the mood was jubilant. The dressing room buzzed with laughter and congratulations, the air thick with the scent of sweat and champagne. Katy was the center of attention, her face flushed with joy and exhaustion. I stood back, watching her bask in the adulation of her bandmates and friends, feeling a mixture of pride and a twinge of something I couldn't quite name. "Jack," Katy called, her voice cutting through the din. She waved me over, her eyes shining. "Come join us!" I navigated through the throng of people, my heart swelling as I reached her side. She wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. "We did it," she whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. "You did it," I corrected, smiling down at her. "You were incredible, Katy. I'm so proud of you." She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching mine. "We did it together, Jack. I couldn't have done this without you." Her words were a balm to my weary heart, and I hugged her tighter, feeling a sense of connection that had eluded us for so long. The past few weeks had tested us in ways I never could have anticipated, but standing there in that chaotic dressing room, I felt like we had come out stronger. The celebration continued well into the night. The band and their entourage headed to a nearby bar, a lively place with a reputation for hosting after-parties. The drinks flowed freely, and the conversation was loud and animated. Katy was in high spirits, her laughter ringing out above the noise. I watched her, a sense of contentment settling over me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe that we had weathered the storm. As the night wore on, the crowd began to thin. I found myself sitting at a table with Charlie and a few others, nursing a beer and enjoying the rare moment of calm. Katy was on the dance floor, her movements graceful and uninhibited, a testament to the confidence and joy that had blossomed in her over the course of the tour. "She looks happy," Charlie said, breaking into my thoughts. "Yeah, she does," I agreed, smiling as I watched her. "You did good, Jack," he continued, his tone sincere. "Not many people would have stuck it out like you did. It's clear you love her a lot." "I do," I said simply, feeling the truth of his words resonate within me. "She means everything to me." As the bar began to close down, Katy made her way back to our table, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright with excitement. "Ready to go?" she asked, her smile infectious. I nodded, standing up and taking her hand. "Let's go home." We walked back to the hotel, the streets of Los Angeles surprisingly quiet in the early morning hours. The city's usual frenetic energy seemed to have softened, leaving behind a tranquil calm that mirrored the peace I felt within. Katy leaned into me as we walked, her head resting on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close, savoring the warmth and closeness. Back in our room, we collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted to do more than kick off our shoes. Katy snuggled into my side, her breath soft and even against my neck. I held her, listening to the sounds of the city outside our window, a contented smile on my lips. The tour was over and we had survived. More than that, we had rediscovered each other, rekindled the connection that had been strained but never broken. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope. We had faced our fears, confronted our doubts, and come out the other side stronger than before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them together. The tour had tested us, but it had also brought us closer, reminding us of the love that had always been at the heart of our relationship. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Katy humming softly, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. I opened my eyes to find her gazing at me, a serene smile on her lips. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft and warm. "Good morning," I replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "How are you feeling?" "Happy," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Relieved, and a little tired." "Me too," I said, chuckling, "but mostly happy. We spent the morning in bed, talking and laughing, savoring the rare luxury of having nothing to do and nowhere to be. It was a stark contrast to the frenetic pace of the past few weeks, a welcome respite that allowed us to reconnect and reflect on the journey we had just completed. In the days that followed, we began the process of packing up and preparing to head home. The band members went their separate ways, promising to stay in touch and already talking about future projects. There was a sense of bittersweet finality in the air, a recognition that this chapter of our lives was closing, even as a new one began to unfold. Kadi and I spent our last night in Los Angeles walking along the beach, the waves lapping at our feet as we talked about the future. We had faced so much together, and the prospect of returning to our normal lives was both exciting and daunting. But as we stood there hand in hand, watching the sun set over the Pacific, I felt a profound sense of peace and anticipation. "I'm ready to go home," Kadi said, her voice soft but sure. "Me too," I replied, squeezing her hand. "But I think we've learned a lot out here, about each other, about ourselves." She nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, we have, and I think we're stronger for it." As the sun dipped below the water, casting a golden glow over the beach, I felt a sense of closure and new beginnings. The tour had been a crucible, a test of our relationship that had revealed its strengths and weaknesses. But through it all, we had remained true to each other, and that gave me hope for whatever lay ahead. With a final look at the setting sun, we turned and walked back toward the city, ready to face the future together, our hearts full of love and hope. Returning home was a strange mix of comfort and unease. The familiar surroundings of our apartment greeted us, but the space felt different, almost foreign, after the chaotic intimacy of the tour. I hoped that being back would offer some stability, but instead it seemed to bring all the unspoken issues into sharper focus. The first week back was a blur of unpacking, catching up on missed responsibilities, and trying to readjust to a normal routine. Kadi threw herself into preparing for the album release, her days filled with interviews, photo shoots, and rehearsals. The pace didn't slow, even though the tour had ended. If anything, it intensified as the release date approached. One evening, after a particularly long day, Kadi and I sat on the couch, a takeout container balanced precariously on my knee. The television droned on in the background, but neither of us was paying much attention. "You okay?" I asked, noticing the furrow in Kadi's brow as she stared at her phone. She sighed, setting the phone down with a weary smile. "Yeah, there's so much to do, and it feels like there's never enough time." I reached over, squeezing her hand. "You're doing great, Kadi. The album's going to be amazing. Just remember to take care of yourself, too." She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I know, Jack. It's just there's a lot riding on this. I feel like I'm constantly being pulled in a million directions." "We'll get through it," I said, wrapping my arm around her. "We always do." As the days passed, I tried to be as supportive as I could, but the cracks in our relationship were becoming harder to ignore. Despite our best efforts, the connection we'd started to rebuild on tour seemed to be slipping through our fingers. We were together, but it often felt like we were living parallel lives, each absorbed in our own concerns. One afternoon, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I arranged a surprise date night, hoping to recapture some of the intimacy we'd shared before everything became so complicated. I made reservations at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown, a place we used to frequent in happier times. When Kadi came home that evening, I greeted her with a bouquet of her favorite flowers and a hopeful smile. "I've got a surprise for you," I said, handing her the flowers. She looked genuinely pleased, a warm smile spreading across her face. "What's all this?" "Date night," I replied, grinning. "I figured we could use a break from all the craziness. Just the two of us." "That sounds wonderful," she said, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Jack. I think we really need tease." We spent the evening reminiscing about old times, laughing over shared memories, and savoring the delicious food. For a few hours, it felt like we had found our way back to each other, the distance and tension melting away in the warmth of our shared affection. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. There was a lingering hesitation in Kata's eyes, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. I wanted to ask her about it, to confront whatever was standing between us. But I didn't want to ruin the fragile peace we had found. The next morning, the uneasy truce we had established seemed to hold, but it didn't take long for the cracks to reappear. Kata's schedule grew even more hectic as the album's release date loomed, and she spent long hours at the studio or in meetings, leaving little time for us. I tried to be understanding, to give her the space she needed, but the loneliness began to gnaw at me. One evening, as I sat alone in our living room, the silence pressing in around me, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. "Jack, it's Danny," came the voice on the other end, his tone subdued. "Danny? Hey, what's up?" I asked, a sense of dread creeping into my voice. "Look, I didn't want to bother you, but I thought you should know. Caddy's been struggling lately. She's been really stressed, and, well, I think she might need you right now." I felt a surge of anxiety, my mind racing. "What do you mean? Is she okay?" "She's just under a lot of pressure," Danny said, his voice careful. "I think she's trying to keep it together, but it's been tough on her. Maybe you could talk to her, see if there's anything you can do." "Thanks, Danny," I said, my voice tight. "I appreciate you letting me know. I'll talk to her." After hanging up, I sat in the silence of our apartment, my mind churning with worry. I knew Katie was under immense pressure, but hearing it from Danny made it feel more urgent, more real. I resolved to talk to her as soon as she got home, to try and understand what was going on. When Katie finally walked through the door that night, she looked exhausted, her face drawn and pale. I stood up, my heart aching at the sight of her. "Katie, we need to talk." She glanced at me, her expression wary. "What about?" "About us," I said, taking a deep breath. "About everything. I know you've been stressed and I want to help, but I need to know what's going on." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "Jack, I'm trying to keep everything together. The album, the tour, us, it's a lot." "I know it is," I said, stepping closer. "But you don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you, Katie. We're in this together, remember?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, a sob escaping her lips. "I'm so scared, Jack. I'm scared of failing, of losing everything. And I feel like I'm losing you too." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as she cried. "You're not going to lose me, Katie. We're going to get through this, no matter what. I love you, and I'm not going anywhere." She clung to me, her tears soaking into my shirt. "I love you too, Jack. I need you to believe in me, to be patient with me." "I do believe in you," I said, my voice firm, "and I'll be as patient as you need. We're going to make this work, Katie. I promise." We stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of our fears and doubts easing in the warmth of our embrace. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start, a step toward healing the wounds that had been festering between us. The days that followed were challenging, but we faced them together, leaning on each other for support. Katie opened up more, sharing her fears and frustrations, and I did my best to be there for her, to listen and offer reassurance. It wasn't easy, but it felt like we were finally moving in the right direction. As the album release drew nearer, the tension began to ease, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. We were learning how to navigate the complexities of our relationship in the face of the demands of Katie's career, finding a new balance that worked for both of us. On the night of the album release, we attended a small celebration with the band and a few close friends. The mood was festive, the culmination of months of hard work and dedication. Katie was radiant, her smile bright as she mingled with guests, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of the moment. I watched her from across the room, feeling a sense of pride and admiration. Despite everything we had been through, she had persevered, her passion and talent shining through. And as I stood there, surrounded by friends and loved ones, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future, a belief that we could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. As the night wore on, Katie found me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jack," she said, taking my hand. "For everything. I couldn't have done this without you." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "We did this together, Katie." "And we're going to keep doing it, no matter what comes next." She smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. "I know, and I'm so grateful for that." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of our friends and the promise of a new beginning, I felt a sense of peace and contentment. The journey wasn't over, and there would be more challenges to face, but I knew that we could face them together, stronger and more united than ever before. Back home, the post-album release euphoria gave way to the realities of our daily lives. Katie's schedule, while less hectic than during the tour, remained demanding, with promotional events, interviews, and planning for her next steps. I focused on my work, but my mind often drifted to Katie, and the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at me for weeks resurfaced, growing more insistent each day. It was late one evening when my suspicions began to crystallize. Katie had been spending a lot of time with her manager, Jake, and their late-night meetings and closed-door conversations began to feel more than professional. I tried to push the thoughts away, chalking it up to my own insecurities, but the nagging doubt wouldn't leave me. One night, as Katie prepared to leave for yet another meeting with Jake, I decided to voice my concerns. "Katie, can we talk for a second?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "It's just, you've been spending a lot of time with Jake lately. I'm starting to feel like I don't see you anymore. Is everything okay?" Katie's expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing her face before she quickly masked it. "Jack, it's just work. You know how important this is. Jake's helping me navigate everything. I understand that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I miss you, Katie. I feel like we're drifting apart again, and I don't want that." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I know, Jack. I miss you too. But this is just how it is right now. I need to focus on my career. We'll get through this, I promise." I nodded, swallowing my frustration. "Okay, just let's not lose sight of us in all of this. We're in this together, remember?" "Of course," she said, giving me a quick kiss before hurrying out the door. "I'll be back soon." But as the door clicked shut behind her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The gnawing doubt continued to grow, fed by the increasing distance between us. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights and strained conversations. Katie's meetings with Jake seemed to multiply, and despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. I found myself analyzing every text, every phone call, looking for signs that my worst fears were coming true. One evening, I decided to confront Katie directly. She had come home late, her face flushed and her eyes avoiding mine. I stood up from the couch, blocking her path to the bedroom. "Katie, we need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. She looked at me, her expression wary. "Can it wait? I'm really tired." "No, it can't wait," I said, my frustration bubbling over. "I need to know what's going on between you and Jake. I need to know the truth." Her eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing her face before she quickly composed herself. "Jack, it's not what you think. Jake and I are just working together. There's nothing going on." "Then why does it feel like you're hiding something from MME?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why do I feel like I'm losing you?" "Because you don't trust me," she shot back, her own voice shaking. "I've told you over and over that there's nothing going on, but you keep pushing and pushing. Maybe the problem isn't me, Jack. Maybe it's you." Her words hit me like a physical blow, and I took a step back, my anger giving way to a deep sense of hurt. "I just want to understand what's happening," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want us to be okay." She looked at me, her eyes softening, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. "We will be," she said, her voice trembling. "But you have to trust me." I nodded, though the doubt still lingered in the back of my mind. "Okay, I'll try." She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me, and I held her tightly, hoping that we could somehow bridge the gap that had grown between us. But as we stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, that no amount of reassurance could completely erase the doubt that had taken root in my heart. The following days were tense, a fragile truce hanging between us. I tried to focus on my work, to give Caddy the space she needed, but my thoughts kept drifting back to our confrontation. I wanted to believe her, to trust that everything she said was true, but the unease continued to gnaw at me, a constant reminder of the cracks in our relationship. One afternoon, while Caddy was at another meeting with Jake, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called Danny, hoping that he might offer some insight or reassurance. "Hey, Danny," I said when he answered. "I was wondering if we could talk. I need your advice about something." "Sure, Jack," he replied, his voice friendly but cautious. "What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure how to articulate my fears without sounding paranoid. "It's about Caddy. I'm worried about her. She's been spending a lot of time with Jake, and I don't know. I just feel like something's off." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear Danny weighing his words carefully. "Jack, I think you should talk to Caddy directly. She's been under a lot of stress, and it might just be work-related. But if you're feeling this way, it's important to address it with her." "I've tried," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "But every time I bring it up, it just turns into a fight. I don't know what to do." "Maybe try a different approach," Danny suggested gently. "Focus on how you're feeling rather than what you think she's doing. Let her know you're there for her, that you want to support her." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Danny. I'll try that." After hanging up, I sat in the silence of our apartment, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I wanted to follow Danny's advice, to approach Caddy with understanding and compassion, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing fear that something was fundamentally wrong. That evening, Caddy came home earlier than usual, her expression guarded as she entered the apartment. I stood up, taking a deep breath, and walked over to her. "Caddy, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She nodded, her eyes wary. "Okay, what is it?" I took her hand, leading her to the couch, and we sat down facing each other. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's been happening," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I know you're under a lot of pressure, and I want to support you. But I also need to be honest about how I'm feeling." She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "Go on." "I'm scared, Caddy," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I'm scared of losing you, of losing what we have. I don't want to be paranoid or distrustful, but I can't ignore the feeling that something's not right. I just want to understand what's going on so we can figure it out together." Her eyes filled with tears and she reached out, taking my hand in hers. "I'm scared too, Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of failing, of everything falling apart. And I'm scared of losing you too." I squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of relief at her openness. "We don't have to be afraid, Caddy. We can face this together, but we need to be honest with each other, no matter how hard it is." She nodded, her tears spilling over as she leaned into me. "I know, and I promise I'll be honest with you, Jack. I just need you to trust me, to believe in us." "I do," I said, holding her tightly. "I believe in us." As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to face it together, to rebuild the trust and connection that had been tested by doubt and fear. Whatever lay ahead, I knew that we could overcome it, as long as we held on to each other. Despite our attempts to rebuild trust, the distance between Caddy and me continued to grow. There were moments of intimacy and connection, but they were overshadowed by the persistent doubts and unspoken fears that lingered in the corners of our relationship. I tried to push them aside, to focus on the love we had shared for so long, but the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong wouldn't leave me. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise Caddy by picking her up from the studio. I left work early, eager to see her and spend some quality time together. As I approached the building, I saw her and Jake standing outside, engaged in what seemed to be a deep conversation. Their body language was relaxed, almost intimate, and my heart sank. I pulled over and watched them from a distance, trying to read their expressions. They were standing close, their heads tilted toward each other as they spoke in low tones. The sight of them together ignited a wave of jealousy and hurt that I struggled to suppress. Finally, Caddy glanced up and saw me. She looked surprised, almost guilty, and quickly stepped away from Jake. She waved at me, a forced smile on her face, and I tried to return it, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Hey, Jack!" she called out as she walked over to the car. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd surprise you," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Figured we could grab dinner or something." She hesitated, glancing back at Jake, who was watching us from a distance. "That sounds great. Just let me finish up with Jake and I'll be right there." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Take your time." As she walked back to Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that washed over me. I watched them exchange a few more words before Caddy finally returned, her expression tense. "Sorry about that," she said as she got into the car. "We were just going over some last-minute details for tomorrow's event." "No problem," I replied, though my voice was tighter than I intended. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," she said, but her tone was unconvincing. "Let's just go home." The drive was silent, the tension between us palpable. I wanted to confront her, to ask about the nature of her relationship with Jake, but I was afraid of what I might hear. Instead, I tried to focus on the road, my mind racing with doubts and fears. That night, as we sat down to dinner, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Caddy, I need to ask you something," I said, setting my fork down and looking her in the eye. She glanced up, her expression wary. "What is it?" "I saw you with Jake earlier," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You looked close. I just need to know what's going on between you two." She sighed, rubbing her temples as if trying to ward off a headache. "Jack, I've told you before, Jake and I are just colleagues. We spend a lot of time together because of work, but that's it." "Then why does it feel like there's more?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "Why do I feel like you're not being completely honest with me?" "Because you're jealous," she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're so obsessed with the idea that something's going on that you're not even willing to trust me." "Maybe it's because you haven't given me a reason to trust you," I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been so secretive lately, and it's driving me crazy. I just want to know the truth, Caddy." "The truth is that you're paranoid," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You're letting your insecurities destroy us, and I don't know how to fix it." Her words cut deep, and I felt a surge of guilt and despair. I wanted to believe her, to trust that everything she said was true, but the doubts that had been festering for so long refused to be silenced. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't want to be this way, Caddy. I love you so much, and I'm scared of losing you." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Jack, but I can't keep fighting this battle with you. You have to trust me, or we're never going to get past this." I nodded, though my heart ached with the weight of my doubts. "I'll try. I promise I'll try." She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "That's all I'm asking for. We'll get through this, Jack. We just need to believe in each other." I squeezed her hand, hoping that somehow we could find a way to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But even as I made that promise, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was on the brink of something irrevocable. The following week, Caddy threw herself into preparing for the upcoming event, a major industry showcase that could make or break her next album. I tried to be supportive, to give her the space she needed, but the tension between us was palpable. We moved through our days in a fragile truce, each trying to navigate the delicate balance between love and distrust. On the day of the event, I decided to surprise Caddy by attending. I had initially planned to stay home, thinking she might need space, but a part of me wanted to be there for her, to show my support in person. The venue was buzzing with excitement when I arrived, industry professionals and fans mingling as they awaited Caddy's performance. I scanned the crowd, searching for her, and finally spotted her backstage, deep in conversation with Jake. I approached them, my heart pounding. Kadi looked up as I neared, her eyes widening in surprise. "Jack, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and concern. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I thought you could use some support." She glanced at Jake, who was watching us with a guarded expression, then back at me. "That's sweet, but I'm really busy right now. Maybe we can talk after the show?" I nodded, though the unease in her voice made my heart sink. "Sure, I'll be in the audience." I made my way to the front of the stage, finding a spot among the throngs of fans eagerly awaiting Kadi's performance. The lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted in cheers as she took the stage, her presence commanding and powerful. But as I watched her sing, my mind kept drifting back to the conversation I had interrupted. There was a tension in the air, a sense that something was building, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all about to come crashing down. After the show, I waited for Kadi backstage, hoping to catch her before she got caught up in the post-performance chaos. She emerged from the dressing room, her face flushed with excitement, and I couldn't help but smile at the sight of her. "You were amazing," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," she said, her voice warm but tinged with exhaustion. "I'm glad you came." As we stood there wrapped in each other's arms, Jake approached, his expression unreadable. "Kadi, we need to go over a few things before you head out," he said, his tone businesslike. She glanced at me, her eyes filled with apology. "I'll be right back, Jack." "I promise." I nodded, though my heart ached at the thought of her leaving with Jake. "I'll wait." As I watched them walk away, a sense of helplessness washed over me. I wanted to trust her, to believe that everything would be okay, but the doubts that had plagued me for so long refused to be silenced. Standing alone in the crowded backstage area, I realized that no matter how much I wanted to believe in us, the cracks in our relationship had grown too deep to ignore. The love we had once shared felt fragile and distant, and I couldn't shake the fear that it was slipping through our fingers, no matter how tightly I tried to hold on. I found myself awake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling while Kadi slept soundly beside me. The events of the past weeks replayed in my mind like a relentless loop, each scene and conversation haunting me with its unresolved tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was teetering on the edge of collapse, and no matter how hard I tried to bury my doubts, they clawed their way back to the surface. The morning after the showcase was eerily quiet between us. Kadi had left early for another round of meetings, leaving me to navigate the silence of our apartment alone. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, trying to gather the courage to confront the reality staring me in the face. When Kadi finally returned home that evening, her exhaustion was palpable. She barely glanced at me as she sank onto the couch, her shoulders slumped with weariness. I hovered in the doorway, unsure of how to breach the growing chasm between us. "Kadi," I began tentatively, "can we talk?" She looked up, her eyes weary but resigned. "About what?" "About us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "About everything that's been happening." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Jack, I don't know what else to say. I've told you over and over that there's nothing going on with Jake. I'm just trying to focus on my career." "I know," I said, my frustration bubbling over despite my efforts to keep calm. "But it feels like there's more going on, Kadi. You're always with him, always talking to him. I feel like I'm losing you." Her expression softened, a flicker of sadness crossing her face. "I don't want that, Jack. I love you, you know that." "I love you too," I admitted, my voice catching in my throat. "But love isn't enough if we can't trust each other." She looked down, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't know how to make you trust me again." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I took a step closer to her. "Maybe we need some time apart," I suggested quietly, "just to figure things out." Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes.
"No, Jack, please. We can work through this."
"I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, the weight of my uncertainty crushing me. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Kadi. I need to believe that you're being honest with me." "I am being honest," she insisted, her voice desperate. "I've never lied to you, Jack. Then why does it feel like you're hiding something from me? I demanded, my own desperation matching hers. Why can't I shake this feeling that I'm losing you? She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I don't know, she whispered brokenly. I don't know. I sank onto the couch beside her, reaching out to touch her arm gently. Caddy, I want to believe you. I want us to be okay, but I don't know how to get past this. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she said, her voice raw with emotion. I'm so sorry, Jack. We sat there in silence, the weight of our unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I wanted to hold her, to comfort her, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. The days that followed were a blur of strained conversations and sleepless nights. Caddy threw herself into her work, using it as a shield against the growing rift in our relationship. I tried to give her the space she needed, to respect her boundaries, but every moment apart only deepened the ache in my chest. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, I called Danny. His voice was warm and familiar as he answered, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Hey, Jack, he said, his tone concerned. How are you holding up? I don't know, Danny, I admitted, my voice cracking with emotion. I feel like I'm losing her, and I don't know what to do. He was silent for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Have you talked to her about how you're feeling? I've tried, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. But every time I bring it up, it just turns into a fight. I feel like I'm drowning, and I can't see a way out. Maybe it's time to take a step back, Danny suggested gently. Give each other some space to figure things out. Sometimes, distance can bring clarity. I don't want to lose her, I whispered, the fear of losing Cotty overwhelming me. I know, Danny said softly, but sometimes holding on too tight can push someone away. Trust that whatever happens, it's for the best. I thanked Danny for his advice and hung up, the weight of his words settling heavily on my shoulders. Maybe he was right. Maybe we needed time apart to find ourselves again, to rediscover the love that had once bound us together. The next morning, I broached the subject with Cotty cautiously. She listened quietly as I spoke, her eyes filled with sadness but understanding. When I suggested that we take a break, her silence spoke volumes, and I knew that she had been thinking the same thing. I think it's for the best, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. We both need time to figure things out. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. I love you, Caddy. I just want what's best for us. She reached out, squeezing my hand gently. I love you too, Jack. And maybe this break is what we need. That evening, we packed our things in silence, the weight of our decision heavy in the air. As I watched Caddy leave our apartment, a part of me hoped that this separation would bring us closer together. But another part of me feared that it would only confirm what I had been afraid to admit all along. As the days turned into weeks, the emptiness of our apartment echoed the hollowness in my heart. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the void left by Caddy's absence, but her presence lingered in every corner of our home. Occasionally, I would hear news about Caddy through mutual friends or social media. She was busy with her music, performing at various venues and making strides in her career. I tried to be happy for her, to celebrate her successes from afar. But each milestone only served as a painful reminder of what we had lost. Months passed, and the ache in my chest refused to dull. I missed Caddy with a visceral intensity that left me breathless at times. I wondered if she felt the same, if she lay awake at night replaying our conversations and wondering where it had all gone wrong. One evening, a text message from an unknown number jolted me out of my reverie. It was brief and to the point. Hey, Jack. It's Caddy. Can we talk? My heart raced as I read those words, hope and fear warring within me. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond, before typing out a simple reply. Sure, when and where? Her response came almost immediately. Tomorrow afternoon. Can we meet at our favorite coffee shop? I agreed, my hands trembling as I put down my phone. A whirlwind of emotions swept through me. Hope, fear, longing, all tangled together in a knot of uncertainty. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, my nerves jangling with anticipation. I ordered a coffee and sat down at a corner table, anxiously watching the door for Kati's arrival. When she finally walked in, my breath caught in my throat. She looked as beautiful as ever, but there was a weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. We exchanged awkward greetings, the tension between us palpable as we sat down opposite each other. "Jack," she began quietly, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I'm sorry for everything." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "I'm sorry too, Kati. I miss you." She looked at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I miss you too, Jack. I miss us." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our words hanging heavy in the air. I wanted to reach out, to take her hand in mine and never let go, but I knew that we needed to tread carefully. Do you think we can try again?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. I searched her eyes, seeing the same uncertainty and longing reflected in them. "I want to try," I said finally, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my heart. "But we have to be honest with each other. We can't go back to how things were." She nodded, tears spilling over as she reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I promise, Jack. I'll be honest with you. I'll do whatever it takes." "I will too," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "Because I love you, Kati. I always have." She smiled through her tears, a radiant expression that warmed my heart. "I love you too, Jack. And this time we'll make it work." I found myself standing outside Kati's apartment door, my heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. It had been weeks since our emotional meeting at the coffee shop, where we had tentatively agreed to give our relationship another chance. Since then, we had been slowly rebuilding trust, navigating through conversations that ranged from heartfelt apologies to cautious optimism about our future. As I raised my hand to knock, a whirlwind of emotions swept through me. I wanted this to work more than anything, but the fear of repeating past mistakes lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow. Would we be able to truly move forward, or were we merely delaying the inevitable? The door swung open, and Kati stood before me, a tentative smile playing on her lips. "Hey," she greeted softly, her eyes searching mine. "Hey," I replied, my voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "I brought dinner. I thought maybe we could talk." She stepped aside to let me in, and I entered the familiar space that still felt somewhat foreign after our time apart. The scent of her perfume mingled with the warmth of the room, evoking memories of lazy mornings and quiet evenings spent together. We settled at the kitchen table, the tension between us palpable yet softened by the familiarity of our shared history. Plates of food sat untouched as we sipped our wine, both of us hesitant to broach the topic weighing heavily on our minds. Finally, Kati set her glass down with a sigh, her gaze steady as she met mine. "Jack, I've been thinking a lot about us," she began, her voice gentle yet tinged with uncertainty. "About where we go from here." I nodded, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I have too, and I want to make things work, Kati. I want us to be okay." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine. "I do too, Jack. But we have to be honest with each other. We can't keep hiding our feelings or brushing things under the rug." "I know," I said earnestly, my heart aching with the weight of her words. "I don't want to go back to how things were. We need to communicate better, to trust each other." Her eyes softened with understanding. "Yes, communication is key, and trust, it's something we'll have to earn back step by step." I swallowed hard, the enormity of her words sinking in. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Kati. I want you to know that." She smiled softly, a flicker of hope lighting up her features. "I believe you, Jack. And I'm willing to try too, but it won't be easy." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. Nothing worth having ever eyes. For a moment, we sat in companionable silence, the weight of our unspoken fears and hopes hanging between us. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently, a silent reassurance of my commitment. "I've missed you," Kati admitted quietly, her voice filled with vulnerability. "I've missed us." "I've missed us too," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than I can say." We finished our dinner in comfortable silence, each lost in our thoughts yet tethered by the tentative promise of a future together. As the evening wore on, the tension that had gripped us loosened, replaced by a tentative sense of peace and possibility. Later that night, as we curled up together on the couch, the distance that had once felt insurmountable seemed to shrink. Kadi rested her head on my shoulder, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my arm. I closed my eyes, savoring the warmth of her presence, the steady rhythm of her breathing, a comforting lullaby. In the days that followed, we navigated through moments of joy and uncertainty, each conversation and shared experience a testament to our determination to rebuild what we had lost. We learned to speak openly about our fears and insecurities, to listen with empathy and understanding. Occasionally, doubts would creep in, triggered by a stray glance or a fleeting memory of our past struggles. But each time we would confront them together, reaffirming our commitment to honesty and trust. As the weeks turned into months, our bond grew stronger, fortified by the trials we had overcome and the love that had withstood the test of time. We laughed more freely, held each other more closely, and dared to dream of a future where our love would continue to thrive. One evening, as we stood together on the balcony of Kadi's apartment, watching the sun set over the city skyline, she turned to me with a smile that lit up her entire face. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she said softly, her eyes shimmering with emotion. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. "I could never give up on us, Kadi. You mean everything to me." She rested her head against my chest, the steady beat of my heart echoing the rhythm of our renewed love. In that moment, I knew that we had found our way back to each other, stronger and more resilient than ever before. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a quiet certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, hand in hand. And as the city lights twinkled below us, I whispered a silent promise to myself and to Kadi, to cherish her, to trust her, and to love her with all that I had, for as long as our hearts beat as one. The months passed in a blur of newfound closeness and cautious optimism. Kadi and I navigated through the ups and downs of rebuilding our relationship, each day a testament to our commitment to honesty and understanding. Our conversations became more candid, our laughter more genuine, and our love deeper than before. One crisp autumn afternoon, as we strolled hand in hand through the park near our apartment, Kadi turned to me with a smile that lit up her entire face. The golden hues of the falling leaves danced around us, creating a picturesque backdrop to our renewed sense of togetherness. "Jack," she began softly, her voice tinged with excitement, "I've been thinking." I looked at her, curiosity piqued by the sparkle in her eyes. "About what?" She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around mine. "About us. About our future." My heart skipped a beat as her words hung in the air, filled with promise and possibility. We had come so far from the uncertain days of our separation, and yet the path ahead still seemed daunting in its unpredictability. "I want us to move forward," Kadi continued earnestly, her gaze unwavering. "To start fresh without the shadows of our past weighing us down." I nodded slowly, a mixture of hope and apprehension swirling within me. "I want that too, Kadi, more than anything." She smiled, a radiant expression that warmed me to the core. "Then let's do it, Jack. Let's take the next step." In the weeks that followed, we embarked on a journey of rediscovery and renewal. We attended couples counseling sessions together, learning new ways to communicate openly and to resolve conflicts constructively. Each session brought us closer together, strengthening the foundation of trust and understanding that we had painstakingly rebuilt. One evening, after a particularly insightful session, we found ourselves lingering outside the counselor's office, the weight of our progress settling comfortably between us. Kadi reached for my hand, her touch reassuring in its familiarity. "I'm proud of us," she said softly, her voice tinged with emotion, "for not giving up, for fighting for what we have." I squeezed her hand gently, overwhelmed by a surge of gratitude and love. "I'm proud of you too, Kadi, and I'm grateful every day that we found our way back to each other." She leaned into me, her head resting against my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever be completely free of our doubts?" she asked quietly. I sighed, the echoes of our past struggles still lingering in the recesses of my mind. I don't know if we'll ever be completely free, I admitted honestly, but I believe we can learn to manage them better, to not let them define us. Kadi nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tracing absent patterns on my arm. I believe that too, she said softly, and I believe in us. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the love that had endured despite its trials, for the resilience that had carried us through our darkest moments, and for the hope that now illuminated our path forward. In the months that followed, we continued to nurture our relationship with care and intention. We carved out moments of quiet intimacy amidst the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, reaffirming our commitment to prioritize each other above all else. One rainy evening, as we curled up together on the couch with a blanket draped over us, Kadi turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. Remember when we used to dream about traveling together? She mused. I chuckled softly, the memory of our shared dreams of exploring distant lands still vivid in my mind. Yeah, we had so many plans, I replied wistfully. Do you still want to travel? She nodded eagerly, her face lighting up with excitement. Yes, more than ever. I want us to see the world together, to create new memories that are just ours. I smiled, my heart swelling with affection. Let's do it, Kadi. Let's make those dreams a reality. And so we began to plan our first adventure together, a trip to a quaint seaside town that had captured our imagination with its charm and tranquility. As we pored over travel guides and mapped out our itinerary, I marveled at how far we had come from the brink of uncertainty to a future filled with hope and possibility. On the day of our departure, as we stood hand in hand at the airport gate, anticipation and excitement bubbled within us. The promise of new experiences awaited us, but more importantly, we carried with us the knowledge that we were embarking on this journey together, united in our love and determination to embrace the future as a team. As we boarded the plane, I stole a glance at Kadi, whose eyes shimmered with excitement and joy. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of fellow travelers and the promise of adventures yet to unfold, I knew with unwavering certainty that our love story was far from over, that it was only just beginning. I woke up to the soft rays of the morning sun filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow over our cozy bedroom. Kadi lay beside me, her breathing deep and steady, the rise and fall of her chest a comforting rhythm. As I watched her sleep, a sense of peace settled over me, a quiet contentment that spoke of the journey we had embarked upon together. In the weeks since our trip, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We had returned home with hearts full of cherished memories and a renewed sense of closeness. Each day seemed brighter, infused with the joy of rediscovered love and the promise of a future that we were building together. Our apartment had become a sanctuary, a place where laughter echoed off the walls and whispered conversations filled the air. We cooked meals together, shared quiet moments on the balcony, and reveled in the simple pleasures of domesticity. One evening, as we sat curled up on the couch with a blanket draped over us, Kadi turned to me with a contemplative expression. "Jack," she began softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty, "do you ever think about what might have happened if things had turned out differently?" I looked at her, the weight of her question settling heavily on my heart. "Sometimes," I admitted quietly, "but I try not to dwell on it. What matters is where we are now, together." She nodded thoughtfully, her fingers absently tracing patterns on my arm. "I know," she said softly. I can't help but wonder." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Kadi, I believe that everything happens for a reason. Maybe we needed to go through those struggles to appreciate what we have now." She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. "I think you're right," she murmured, "and I'm grateful every day that we found our way back to each other." As we sat there in companionable silence, the glow of the sunset painting the room in hues of orange and gold, I felt a surge of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the love that had endured despite its trials, for the strength that had carried us through our darkest moments, and for the hope that now illuminated our path forward. In the days that followed, we continued to nurture our relationship with care and intention. We took long walks in the park, hand in hand enjoying the crisp autumn air and the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot. We shared meals with friends and family, celebrating the milestones and moments that filled our lives with joy. One rainy afternoon, as we lingered in a cozy cafe with steaming cups of coffee, Caddy turned to me with a twinkle in her eye. "Jack," she began, her voice filled with excitement. "I've been thinking." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the playful tone in her voice. "About what?" She took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering as she met mine. "About taking the next step," she said earnestly. About starting a family." My heart skipped a beat at her words, a rush of emotions flooding through me. The prospect of parenthood had always been a distant dream, overshadowed by the challenges we had faced in our relationship. But now, as I looked at Ketty with love and adoration, I saw a future filled with possibilities. "I've thought about it too," I admitted softly, my voice tinged with awe. "I want that, Ketty. I want to build a family with you." Her face lit up with joy, a radiant smile that warmed me to the core. "Really?" she asked eagerly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Really," I affirmed, my own eyes misting with emotion. "I want us to create a life together, to share all the joys and challenges that come with it." She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I love you, Jack," she whispered, her voice filled with tenderness. "And I can't wait to see what our future holds." That evening, as we walked home under a sky painted with the colors of twilight, I felt a sense of wonder and anticipation. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with twists and turns that we could not foresee. But with Caddy by my side, I knew that we would navigate it together, hand in hand, bound by a love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger than ever. As we approached our apartment building, Caddy stopped suddenly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's start planning," she suggested eagerly, "for our future." I smiled, my heart overflowing with love for this woman who had become my anchor and my greatest joy. "Yes," I said softly, "let's start planning." And as we stepped through the threshold of our home, the future stretched out before us like an open road, brimming with endless possibilities, and the promise of a love that would endure forever. I couldn't believe the news when Caddy told me. We were sitting at our favorite cafe, sipping our morning coffees, when she looked at me with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Jack," she began, her voice slightly shaky, "I think I might be pregnant." My heart skipped a beat as her words sank in. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, filling me with a rush of emotions, joy, disbelief, and a touch of apprehension. We had talked about starting a family, but now that it was potentially happening, I felt a wave of both exhilaration and uncertainty. "Are you sure?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. Caddy nodded, her eyes bright with tears threatening to spill over. "I took a test this morning," she admitted, her hand trembling slightly as she reached into her bag. She pulled out a small white stick and placed it on the table between us. I leaned forward, my eyes fixing on the tiny plus sign that seemed to glow against the stark white background. It was real. We were going to have a baby. A million thoughts raced through my mind. How would we prepare? Were we ready for this responsibility? Could I be the father I wanted to be? But amidst the uncertainty, one thing was crystal clear. I wanted this child with Caddy more than anything. I reached across the table and took Caddy's hand in mine, squeezing it gently. "This is amazing," I said softly, my voice filled with awe and tenderness. "We're going to be parents." Tears spilled down Caddy's cheeks, mingling with her radiant smile. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy, Jack." We sat there for a long while, absorbing the enormity of the moment. Our hands intertwined as we savored the joy and anticipation that filled the air around us. The cafe buzzed with the hum of conversation, but in that moment, it felt like the entire world had slowed down, allowing us to bask in the miracle unfolding within us. As we walked home, the reality of impending parenthood sank in deeper. We talked about nursery ideas, parenting philosophies, and our hopes and dreams for our child. Each conversation brought us closer together, reaffirming our bond and our shared excitement for the future. In the weeks that followed, Caddy's pregnancy progressed smoothly. We attended prenatal appointments together, marveling at the sight of our baby on the ultrasound screen, their tiny heartbeat echoing through the room. The anticipation grew with each passing day as we prepared our home and our hearts for the new addition to our family. One evening, as we sat in the nursery we had lovingly decorated, Caddy turned to me with a serene smile. "I can't believe we're here," she said softly, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "In just a few weeks, our lives will change forever." I nodded, overcome with gratitude and awe. "I'm so grateful for you, Caddy," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "You've brought so much light and love into my life." She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. "And you into mine," she murmured. I couldn't imagine going through this journey with anyone else. As we sat there, surrounded by the promise of new beginnings, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and surprises yet to come. But with Caddy by my side, I knew that we would face it all with courage, love, and unwavering dedication to each other and our growing family. In the days that followed, we eagerly counted down the weeks until our baby's arrival. We read books on parenting, attended childbirth classes, and spent quiet moments together imagining what our future would look like as a family of three. One rainy afternoon, as we lounged on the couch with a pile of baby clothes spread out before us, Caddy turned to me with a playful glint in her eye. "Do you think they'll have your eyes or mine?" she mused, holding up a tiny onesie with colorful polka dots. I chuckled softly, imagining our child with Katie's warm smile in my eyes. "Maybe a perfect blend of both," I replied, my heart swelling with affection. Katie smiled, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "I can't wait to meet them," she said softly, her voice filled with love and anticipation. And as we sat there surrounded by the tangible evidence of our growing excitement, a crib waiting in the corner, a collection of children's books on the shelf, I knew with unwavering certainty that our journey into parenthood was not just a new chapter, but the beginning of a beautiful and fulfilling adventure that we would cherish for the rest of our lives. The day finally arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement swirling in the air. Caddy and I stood hand in hand outside the hospital's labor and delivery unit, our hearts pounding in anticipation of meeting our baby for the first time. We had prepared meticulously for this moment, attended childbirth classes, packed our hospital bags, and set up the nursery with care. But nothing could truly prepare us for the overwhelming emotions that washed over us as we stepped through those doors. Inside, the atmosphere was serene yet charged with anticipation. Nurses moved about with quiet efficiency, their reassuring smiles offering us a sense of comfort amidst the nerves. Caddy was ushered into a private room where she would labor, and I followed closely behind, my hand never leaving hers. Hours passed in a blur of contractions, deep breaths, and encouraging words from the medical staff. Caddy's determination and strength were awe-inspiring as she navigated through each wave of pain, her focus unwavering on the imminent arrival of our child. I stood by her side, offering words of encouragement and comfort, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride and admiration for the woman who was about to become the mother of our child. As the hours stretched into what felt like an eternity, the moment we had been waiting for finally arrived. The nurse announced that it was time to push, and Caddy's grip tightened around my hand, her eyes locking onto mine with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "You can do this, Caddy," I whispered, my voice filled with unwavering belief in her strength. With each push, the room seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The air was charged with a palpable sense of anticipation and love, and then, in a rush of emotion and relief, our baby entered the world. A tiny, perfect miracle wrapped in a blanket, their cries filling the room with the sound of new life. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at our child for the first time, their tiny fingers grasping mine as if to reassure me that everything was all right. Caddy's exhausted yet radiant smile mirrored my own as we marveled at the tiny bundle nestled against her chest. "We did it," Caddy murmured, her voice filled with awe and exhaustion. "We have a baby," I nodded, overcome with emotions too profound for words. The journey to this moment had been filled with challenges and uncertainties, but now, as I looked at our child, I knew with absolute certainty that every moment had been worth it. We had created a life together, a life that would forever be a testament to our love and commitment to each other. In the days that followed, our little family settled into a new rhythm of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. The nursery that we had lovingly prepared became the heart of our home, filled with the soft murmur of lullabies and the sweet scent of baby powder. Together, Caddy and I navigated the joys and challenges of parenthood with patience and grace. We took turns soothing our babies' cries in the middle of the night, marveled at their first smiles and giggles, and cherished the quiet moments when our little one slept soundly in our arms. One evening, as we sat together in the nursery with our baby nestled between us, Caddy turned to me with a tender smile. "I never knew my heart could feel so full," she confessed softly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Me neither," I admitted, my voice filled with love and wonder. "Our baby has brought so much joy into our lives." Caddy leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. "I love you," she murmured, her words a whispered promise of forever. "And I love you," I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude for the life we had created together. As we sat there, surrounded by the tangible evidence of our love, a crib filled with toys, a rocking chair that had become a sanctuary of quiet moments, I knew with unwavering certainty that our journey was just beginning. Parenthood had brought us closer together, strengthening our bond and deepening our love in ways that words could never fully express. And as our baby cooed softly in their sleep, I whispered a silent promise to Kadi and to our child, to cherish every moment, to navigate life's challenges with courage and love, and to always hold on to the precious gift of family that we had been blessed with. The first year of parenthood was a whirlwind of sleepless nights and endless discoveries. Our baby, whom we named Lily, brought immeasurable joy into our lives with her infectious laughter and curious eyes. Kadi and I marveled at every milestone, her first tooth, her first tentative steps, and the way she would babble incoherently as if trying to join in our conversations. Adjusting to life as parents was both challenging and rewarding. We juggled our careers with diaper changes and late-night feedings, finding a delicate balance between nurturing Lily and nurturing our relationship. Date nights became a cherished escape, brief moments carved out amidst the chaos of parenthood, where we could reconnect and remind ourselves of the love that had brought us to this point. As Lily grew, so did our understanding of each other as partners and parents. We learned to communicate more effectively, to support each other through the inevitable highs and lows of raising a child. Our home was filled with laughter and love, with toys strewn across the living room floor and sticky handprints decorating the walls, a testament to the vibrant life we had created together. But amidst the joy, there were moments of doubt and uncertainty. Parenthood challenged us in ways we had never anticipated. We grappled with decisions about Lily's education, her health, and her future. There were sleepless nights spent worrying over fevers and milestones, and quiet moments of reflection where we wondered if we were doing enough. One evening, as we sat on the couch after putting Lily to bed, Caddy turned to me with a furrowed brow. "Do you ever worry about whether we're doing the right thing?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I nodded, understanding her concern all too well. "All the time," I admitted honestly. "But I think that's part of being a parent, constantly questioning and striving to do better." Caddy sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly as she leaned into me. "I just want what's best for her," she murmured, her voice filled with love and determination. "And we will figure it out together," I reassured her, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "We're a team, Caddy. We'll navigate this journey together, just like we have everything else." In the months that followed, we faced new challenges and celebrated new milestones. Lily took her first steps, uttered her first words, and blossomed into a spirited toddler with a personality all her own. Our days were filled with adventures to the park, messy art projects in the kitchen, and bedtime stories that transported us to magical worlds. As Lily grew older, our bond as a family grew stronger. We created traditions that filled our home with warmth and laughter. A yearly summer road trip to visit Kata's parents, holiday baking sessions that left flour dusting the countertops, and lazy Sunday mornings spent cuddled together in bed. But amidst the joy, there were moments of heartache too. We faced unexpected challenges, illnesses that tested our strength, disagreements that tested our patience, and moments of doubt that tested our resolve. Through it all, we leaned on each other for support, drawing strength from the love and commitment that anchored us. One rainy afternoon, as we sat at the kitchen table sipping hot tea, Caddy turned to me with a determined glint in her eye. "I think it's time," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet resolve. I looked at her, sensing the weight of her words. "Time for what?" She took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Time to expand our family," she replied earnestly. "I want Lily to have a sibling." My heart swelled with affection at the thought of our family growing even larger. "I want that too," I admitted, my voice tinged with excitement. "I think Lily would make an amazing big sister." Katie smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "Let's do it, Jack," she said softly. "Let's give Lily a sibling." And so we embarked on the journey once again, this time with the knowledge and experience that parenthood had bestowed upon us. We navigated the ups and downs of fertility treatments with hope and determination, leaning on each other for support during moments of uncertainty and celebrating each small victory along the way. Months turned into years, filled with anticipation and longing, but our determination never wavered. And then, one sunny morning, Kadi emerged from the bathroom with tears of joy streaming down her face, holding a pregnancy test that displayed two unmistakable lines. "We're having another baby," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and awe. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close as tears of joy filled my own eyes. "I can't believe it," I murmured, overcome with gratitude and love. "We're going to be parents again." As we shared the news with Lily, who danced around the room with excitement, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Our journey as a family had been filled with challenges and triumphs, heartaches, and moments of pure joy. And now, as we prepared to welcome another precious life into our home, I knew with unwavering certainty that our love story was far from over, that it was only just beginning, with new chapters waiting to unfold.